No one dared approach the dog who attacked everyone, until a blind little girl stood up to him. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. The night was heavy with smoke and chaos. Ranger, a majestic German shepherd with a sleek grey coat and eyes like steel, had served 7 years with the K9 unit. He was inseparable from his human partner, Captain James Carter, an officer known for his courage and dedication. But that night, everything changed. The fire was no accident. Flames devoured the brick walls of the police station as officers scrambled to save documents, evidence, and lives. In the chaos, Ranger barked with fury and desperation, searching for James through the choking smoke. The captain was trapped, trying to free an injured prisoner. Ranger didn't hesitate. He charged into the flames, grabbing James's jacket in his jaws and dragging him toward the exit. But a burning beam crashed between them, slamming Ranger against the wall. The fire scorched his back and knocked him unconscious. James was rescued, but he was badly hurt. Hours later, Ranger was found covered in ash, his muzzle bleeding, his eyes empty of their former light. He was no longer the same dog. The Dawn Haven Sanctuary, a shelter for animals rescued from extreme situations, took him in at the police force's request. They couldn't bear to put him down, but even there the weight of his trauma hung over him like a shadow. Ranger growled at anyone who came near. 2 caretakers were lightly bitten just for trying to clean his wounds. His kennel was isolated. No one approached unless they had to. Some workers called him the lost soul. Others whispered he was beyond saving. The sanctuary's director, Margaret Lawson, a stern woman with a cold gaze and measured manners, was already talking to the vet about a humane decision. "We can't let him keep suffering," she said in her usual clinical tone. "He's a dangerous animal, unfixable." But one voice refused to accept that verdict: Clara Bennett. A quiet volunteer with soft brown hair that fell gently over her shoulders, Clara was an unusual presence at the sanctuary. She didn't talk much. She skipped meetings. She arrived at dusk with a black violin case under her arm and sat silently with different animals, playing her music with a softness that seemed to wrap the air in velvet. When she heard about Ranger, she didn't feel fear. She felt a calling, and so her ritual began. Every day at the end of the afternoon, Clara sat in front of Ranger's kennel. She didn't speak or try to touch him. She just opened her case, tuned her violin, and began to play. Gentle pieces, melodies by Bach, fragments of her own compositions, and sometimes just nameless, mournful scales. The first day, Ranger didn't react. The second, he growled. The third, he dragged himself to the farthest corner of his kennel. But on the 5th day, his ears twitched. The music, without forcing its way in, was starting to remind him of something he no longer understood: peace. On her 7th day, Clara brought a small container. Inside were bits of grilled chicken breast. She placed one just out of reach of the kennel and played again. Nothing happened, but the next day the peace was gone, and the day after that, and the one after that. Ranger was beginning to link that sound with something other than pain, something familiar. The sky over Willow Creek turned golden every evening, as if the sun was saying goodbye with a quiet sadness. Against this soft light and cool air, Clara Bennett became a familiar sight on the gravel path leading to Ranger's isolated kennel. Her boots crunched on fallen leaves, and the black violin case slung over her shoulder seemed to carry not just an instrument, but a purpose. That day, like every day, she stopped in front of Ranger's kennel. She didn't say a word. She just sat on the old wooden bench, opened her case with care and tuned her violin. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant song of a sparrow. Ranger, lying in the shadows of his corner, didn't lift his head, but his eyes, deep, dull, watchful, cracked open when the first notes floated out. Clara didn't play to entertain. She played like someone praying. With her eyes closed, her body slightly swaying, she let the melodies flow with a sweetness that felt otherworldly. That evening, she chose an old American folk tune, Shenandoah, its longing wrapping the air like a memory that refused to fade. When she finished, she gently placed 2 pieces of grilled chicken breast in front of the kennel and left. This routine went on for weeks. She never forced contact, she never called Ranger by name. She just came, played, left her offering, and went. But Ranger's wounded soul, like a field after a fire, was starting to show tiny signs of life. The first time he crept toward the bars while she played, he moved with extreme caution. His paws stepped as if on broken glass, his nose sniffing the air filled with music and meat. He didn't growl, he didn't back away. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him, staying still. A faint smile, barely a quiver on her lips, was enough to crack the invisible wall between them. The next evening, as she played a slow piece by Vivaldi, Ranger sat near the edge of his kennel for the first time, silent. He watched. He breathed slower. When she finished, she stood, packed her case, and before leaving, spoke a single word for the first time: thanks. No one at the sanctuary could explain it. Margaret Lawson watched through security cameras, frowning with a mix of doubt and suspicion. To her, this was just a fragile illusion, a temporary fluke. He's reacting to the food, not the music, she told a vet. The girl's fooling herself with nonsense. But something in Ranger's eyes was changing. They weren't just a mirror of the past anymore. There was a spark, small but alive. One day when Clara arrived, she found something unexpected. The piece of chicken she'd left the day before hadn't been eaten as usual. Instead, it sat untouched, next to a wilted daisy some breeze must have carried to the kennel, placed carefully, like an offering, in return. It wasn't hunger, it was a bond. Spring brought a whisper of renewal, as if the universe itself were breathing after a long winter's grief. At Dawnhaven Sanctuary, the daily grind seemed unchanged. Clara kept up her daily visits. Ranger grew calmer each time, and though no one else dared approach his kennel, her music was becoming part of the sanctuary's soundscape. Then Lily arrived. She was 8 years old, pale as fresh snow, with blonde hair like strands of sunlight and blue eyes that couldn't see. Born blind, Lily was Clara's niece, visiting the sanctuary for the first time on an unplanned weekend trip. Her mother, Sarah Harper, Clara's sister, and a strict woman who disliked surprises, had entrusted Lily to her for a few hours, unaware that this innocent visit would change lives. "Where's the dog who loves music?" Lily asked, clutching her aunt's hand. "He's not just any dog, sweetheart," Clara answered gently, careful not to scare her. "He's a soul who's been through fire." Lily frowned, as if she could grasp the weight of those words. Without waiting for permission, she let go of Clara's hand and walked slowly toward the kennel. Her white cane tapped the stones, her small frame guided by an instinct stronger than reason. "Hi," she said softly, as if speaking to a dream. "I'm Lily. I brought you a song." Ranger tensed. He stood abruptly, his scarred muscles trembling under his fur. A low growl rumbled from his throat. Nearby caretakers jumped up. One shouted, "Get her away, he's dangerous!" But Clara raised a hand, not with authority but with faith. "Wait," she whispered, more to the universe than to them. "Just wait." Lily, fearless, pulled a small blue harmonica from her backpack. She sat on the dirt ground right in front of the kennel and started playing a simple children's tune, pure and light. The notes drifted like soap bubbles, effortless, without agenda. Ranger watched her, and then something unheard of happened. The German shepherd stepped forward slowly. His paws thudded on the concrete as if time had slowed. His nose slipped between the bars, sniffing the lavender scent in the girl's hair. Lily reached out her hand. "Can I touch you?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. Everyone held their breath. Ranger didn't pull back, he didn't growl, he didn't bare his teeth. He let the girl's small, trembling fingers brush his forehead, trace his ear, feel the roughness of his scar. For the first time, the kennel didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a sanctuary. "You're soft," Lily whispered, "and you're sad. But I am too sometimes." Clara dropped to her knees. Silent tears streamed down her face. Margaret, watching from a distance, pressed her lips tight as if trying to swallow her doubts. The moment lasted only seconds, but it was etched like a miracle. After that, Lily became a regular visitor. She came every Saturday with her harmonica, a lavender-scented scarf, and a joy that lit up even the coldest corners of the sanctuary. The connection Ranger had formed with Clara transformed with Lily. It wasn't just calm anymore, it was devotion. Whenever she arrived, he stood tall, eyes bright, body tense with excitement. He slept next to her scented cloth. He growled if anyone raised their voice near her. He wasn't just a dog, he was a guardian. The routine at Dawnhaven Sanctuary shifted. It wasn't feeding times or cleaning shifts that set the rhythm anymore. It was Lily's arrival. Every Saturday at the same hour, the main gate creaked open, and there she was, her blue backpack harmonica dangling on a string, white cane lightly tapping the ground, and the unmistakable scent of lavender wrapping her like a second skin. Ranger knew. From early morning he grew restless. He paced his kennel, sniffed the air, perked his ears. When Sarah's car rolled up the gravel path, the German shepherd stood firm at the bars, chest out, eyes lit with something more than instinct. Hope. Clara watched from nearby. Her violin had taken a back seat. She understood her role wasn't to lead, but to bridge. Her music had cracked the wall, but Lily's pure soul crossed the gap. One cloudy afternoon, with the air smelling of wet earth, Lily pulled a small piece of cloth from her backpack. It was her favorite scarf, one she'd kept since she was 5. White cotton embroidered with flowers by her grandmother, scented with soft lavender. She held it out carefully in front of the bars. "This is for you," she said simply, like someone offering a piece of their heart. "So you're not alone when I'm not here." Ranger sniffed it. For a moment, his eyes closed. He took the scarf with a gentleness no caretaker could have imagined. He carried it to the corner where he slept, and instead of tearing it like he did with everything else, placed it by his head, resting his muzzle on it. That day, Lily didn't play her harmonica. That day, they just sat together. Time passed. The bond became routine, but not an empty one, a sacred habit. Lily learned to read Ranger's silences. She knew when he was restless, sad, or alert, and he, somehow, understood her moods too. If she came crying from a bad dream or a rough day at school, Ranger lay beside her still until her trembling stopped. The sanctuary workers started calling them the inseparable duo. Sarah, Lily's mother, was wary at first, but softened when she saw her daughter laugh for the first time in months. Her tense gaze eased when she found Lily asleep on the ground, her head resting on Ranger's side. Margaret Lawson, though, kept her distance. Her judgmental silence lingered like a dark cloud on the horizon. One morning, as Clara brewed tea in the sanctuary's kitchen, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, official, stamped with the county police seal. It came from the Veterans Hospital. The sender, James Carter. Ranger's old partner had woken after months in intensive care. His body was scarred from burns. His voice, still weak, asked one thing: is he still alive? Clara's heart sank as she read it. She knew a reunion was coming, but what would happen when Ranger had to choose between his past and his present? The sky over Willow Creek was heavy with clouds when a dark van from the Veterans Hospital pulled up to Dawn Haven Sanctuary's gate. In the backseat, a thin man with a face weathered by fire and clear eyes, shadowed by nostalgia, stared silently. James Carter no longer wore a uniform, but he carried himself like a soldier. His face bore fresh skin grafts. He leaned on a cane, but his resolve was stronger than steel. Clara waited with Margaret Lawson, whose face showed unease, as if she feared this new chapter might disrupt the sanctuary's careful order. "Are you sure you're ready to see him?" Clara asked quietly. James didn't answer. He just nodded. They led him through the halls, past kennels, medicine shelves, and quiet rooms. The air was thick with tension. As they neared the Isolation Area 10 area, Clara noticed Ranger was already restless. Standing tall, sniffing the air with a quickened pace, his muscles quivered as if every fiber of his memory sparked, recognizing a scent buried deep in his core. Then he saw him. James stopped in front of the kennel. He said nothing. Neither did the dog. They just looked at each other. Time stood still. Ranger took a step forward, then another. His eyes widened. A tremor ran through him. His breathing quickened. A low growl started in his throat, but faded before it fully formed. Instead, a deep whimper came, like a cry held back for years. James, his voice breaking, whispered, "There you are, old friend." Ranger pressed his nose to the bars. James reached out, fearless, with the trembling certainty of someone who's loved and lost. The dog slowly touched his hand with his nose. It was a brief moment, but enough to unleash a wave of emotion that swept over everyone there. Clara watched, her heart in her throat. Margaret crossed her arms, tense. And then, as if answering an unseen call, the gate to the area opened, and Lily appeared. She'd arrived unnoticed, guided by her white cane, her lavender scarf tangled around her neck, her face calm. Sensing the strange silence, she stopped. "What's going on?" she asked, raising her voice. Clara rushed to her side. "Lily, someone very special is here. Someone from Ranger's past." Lily frowned. "His past? Someone who loves him too?" James turned to her. He looked at her with a mix of surprise and warmth. Guided by Clara, Lily approached until her cane brushed James's leg. "Are you the one who saved him?" "He saved me," James corrected, his voice a thread. Lily smiled. She knelt by the kennel, as she did every Saturday, and reached through the bars. "I'm here, Ranger, don't go." The dog froze. He looked at James, then at Lily. Two worlds, two lives, two different loves. One forged in fire and duty, the other born of silence, music, and lavender. And then he chose. He turned, leaving behind the man who'd been his partner, and walked to the girl. He lay beside her, resting his head in her lap, and closed his eyes. James said nothing. He just nodded, holding back tears. He understood. "He's where he belongs," he whispered. Margaret left without a word. Clara bowed her head in respect. Lily, unaware of what she'd just witnessed, stroked her guardian's neck with innocent love. And the lavender scarf stayed there untouched. The days after the reunion marked a turning point at Dawnhaven Sanctuary. Though Ranger stayed in his kennel, it no longer needed double locks. Silent alarms were turned off. Caretakers stopped fearing his hallway and began passing by without worry. Something had shifted in his stride, in the way his tail moved when he heard familiar steps. He was no longer the unpredictable animal who'd arrived broken inside and out. Lily, now with full access to the area, spent more time with him than ever. She learned to feed him by hand, to brush his scarred fur gently, to recognize the soft huff that meant he wanted to walk. With her, Ranger needed no leash. Her quiet voice, her slow steps, her presence were enough. Clara, a witness and guide to this change, began to wonder something once unthinkable. What if Ranger could be more than a symbol of recovery? What if he still had a purpose? A new one. She wrote to the Bright Path Foundation, a group specializing in rehabilitating traumatized working dogs. After reviewing vet reports, video footage, and behavior logs, they sent a bold proposal: start a pilot program uniting two worlds, rescued dogs and people with visual impairments. The first step was tough. Test if Ranger retained basic training skills without triggering his past trauma. Clara watched each session with a tight heart. The trainer, Robert Mitchell, a precise man with a calm voice, was stunned by the early results. "This dog isn't broken. He was just waiting for someone to listen." The tests went on. Obedience commands, navigation drills, impulse control, all passed with a response that moved even the most skeptical staff. But the real test came with Lily. In one exercise, she had to walk through cones in a yard. Ranger would guide her, no leash, just gentle flank pressure and nose nudges. On the first try, Lily tripped. She fell to her knees. Everyone held their breath. Ranger didn't move. Instead of barking or bolting, he approached calmly, stood behind her and let her lean on him to stand. "I'm okay," she said, smiling, brushing dirt off her dress. The next try, they completed the course. No mistakes, no hesitation. Sarah, watching from afar, let a quiet tear fall. "I never thought I'd trust a dog this much," she admitted to Clara, "but now I can't picture my daughter without him." Word of the pilot's success spread. The foundation made the program official, naming it Beacons of Hope. Other dogs were sent for rehab. Ranger became a living symbol of hope rising from ashes. At the end of each training session, Lily gave her guardian a small reward, a homemade treat, and a tune on her harmonica. And Ranger, disciplined and attentive, lay beside her with the faded lavender scarf still tied to his collar. Worn, but sacred. He was no longer the dog in the cage. He was now Lily's eyes. The storm hit without warning. The sky, clear and calm hours earlier, turned into a grey, roaring curtain. Wind gusts whipped the trees, and local news soon reported road closures due to flooding risks. Schools in Willow Creek let students out early. Sarah, stuck in a traffic jam from a flooded highway, couldn't reach Lily's school in time. Lily, used to a strict routine, boarded the return bus with the other kids, unaware that the driver's choice would change her fate. The bus took a rural road less hit by rain, but a sudden surge of water crossed the path. With no options, the driver stopped near a shaky wooden bridge. The storm raged. The sound of water slamming metal beams and snapping branches was so loud, even adults felt fear. Lily, though she couldn't see, knew something was wrong from the voice's tone. The kids were evacuated one by one down a side path. In the chaos, no one saw Lily take a wrong turn. Meanwhile, at Dawnhaven, Ranger was restless. He refused food. He paced in circles, sniffing the air with unusual anxiety. Clara noticed and turned on the reception TV. A news alert flashed. Partial evacuation at Maple Grove Elementary due to flash floods. Some children still unaccounted for. Lily's name was listed among the missing. Clara's heart stopped. She ran to the outdoor yard and found Ranger at the gate, tense, vibrating like an arrow ready to fly. He knew. He didn't wait for orders. When the gate opened, the German Shepherd shot down the muddy road with a speed that defied his scars. His body, marked by burns, was now a machine of precision driven by instinct and love. For hours, Ranger followed trails invisible to human eyes. He ignored noises, strange smells, obstacles. He climbed slippery hills, crossed soaked thickets, dodged fallen branches and chunks of torn asphalt. And then, he found her. Lily was crouched under an old wooden bridge, soaked to the bone, shivering, knees scraped. She'd tried to follow a path alone, but mud and water had erased her senses. Her cane had snapped in a fall. She had no way to navigate. Ranger approached silently. He let out a soft growl, more like a caress than a call. Lily lifted her face. "Ranger?" he answered with a gentle bark. He touched her arm with his nose, then crouched beside her, pressing his body to hers, giving warmth. With measured steps, he began guiding her back, not by the flooded path he'd come, but an alternate route he seemed to recall from his police training. The rain eased. In the distance, rescuers' lights shone like beacons of hope. When Lily emerged from the woods, her arm over Ranger's back, the sight was met with reverent silence. Sarah dropped to her knees. Clara covered her face to hold back sobs. A paramedic approached. Ranger stepped in front for a second, assessing. Then, as if knowing his job was done for now, he moved aside. Before being taken to the stretcher, Lily asked, "My scarf, does he have it?" And he did. Ranger still wore it on his collar, soaked, faded, but whole. Years passed like a melody played softly, leaving not oblivion, but a trail of lasting love. Willow Creek changed, but its heart held something untouched. The story of a dog who didn't just save lives but taught others to see with their hearts. Ranger lived to 15. In his final months, his steps slowed, his fur grayed, and his eyes, though less sharp, kept the same quiet spark of a soul fulfilled. He never stopped guiding Lily, though their walks were shorter, their field strolls briefer. Lily, now a teen, became a local inspiration. She played piano, composed music inspired by scents and sounds, and wrote Braille letters to blind children worldwide. When Ranger slept his last, it was quietly, lying beside Lily's favorite armchair, his head on the tattered lavender scarf, worn but sacred, with soft music in the background. She'd sensed it before anyone spoke. She touched his fur and smiled through tears. "Thank you for showing me the way, even when I couldn't see." The funeral was small but vast in spirit. People from nearby towns sent flowers, letters, toys, even medals from retired police dogs. A quiet ceremony was held in Dawnhaven's central garden, where Clara, now director, oversaw a bronze plaque's unveiling, etched with elegant words, "To Ranger, the dog who taught me to see with my heart." Sarah, eyes wet, laid a white rose at the statue's base. Robert Mitchell, flown in from England, quietly placed a Bright Path Foundation honor badge beside Ranger's preserved collar, sealed in glass. And Lily, no longer the frail girl who'd first come to the sanctuary, now a poised young woman with a gentle voice and captivating presence, she opened the Ranger Music Therapy and Training Center months later. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. A dream she shared with Clara. There, rescued dogs from police forces and conflict zones were trained to be more than guides. They became soul companions. Each session began with a piece Lily composed. Every morning, before work started, she played a short tune on her blue harmonica. A simple, sweet sound that recalled the first time an impossible friendship began through kennel bars. Among the center's artworks, one painting stood out. Ranger with the lavender scarf around his neck, eyes calm, body strong, and Lily, a child beside him, playing. Behind them, an open field, no cages, no bars, just light. Because some stories don't end, they become legacies. 5 years after Ranger's passing, Willow Creek marked a special day. The launch of the Federal Beacons of Hope program, now with centers in 6 states and 3 European countries. It all began with one sacred bond between a blind girl and a wounded dog. From that moment, the world seemed to grasp something it had overlooked. Love needs no words, and healing can come through unexpected paths. Lily Harper, now 20, became a composer known for works built from sensory cues, pieces using scents, textures, and natural sounds to convey emotion. Her album Language of the Heart was nominated for a Youth Classical Grammy. In every interview, every speech, she spoke of Ranger as if he were still beside her. "I didn't train him," she'd say. "He trained me." Clara, her aunt and first guide, remained co-director of the center. With grey streaks in her hair, she still played violin for evening sessions with new dogs. Sometimes at day's end, she returned to the stone bench by Ranger's old kennel, now a lavender garden, and played for the stars. James Carter, after years of physical therapy, became a speaker on human-animal bonds at veterans units. He visited the center yearly and kept close with Lily, whom he fondly called "my second patrol partner." He always said Ranger had 2 missions, one as a police dog, another as a soul guardian. Margaret Lawson, once skeptical and rigid, retired 2 years after the program's official start. She sent a handwritten letter to the foundation admitting, "What I once saw as emotional weakness was in truth the purest strength. I was wrong. Thank you for teaching me." Robert Mitchell returned to England but left a legacy, a sensitive training manual based on trust and empathy, adopted by dozens of centers worldwide. As for the old lavender scarf, it was sealed in a glass case at Lily's center with an inscription, "Not a decoration," a bridge between a heart that saw and eyes that hadn't yet learned to trust. Today, when the sun sets over Willow Creek's fields, you might see a young woman with steady steps leading other children, eyes closed, not from blindness but by choice, teaching them to feel, listen, and trust the unseen world. And sometimes, in the gentle breeze through the lavender, they say you can still hear the faint sound of a harmonica and the steady steps of a dog who never stopped guiding. Because when love is true, it doesn't die. It becomes a path. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.